Hey guys, what is up? And in this video, I want to give my review of the Google Pixel 4a and why ultimately I think this is the budget phone you should get in 2020 at $349. So I've been using this phone for a while now, and actually the more I've used it, the more I like it. I think a big part of that is I've come from a Oneplus 7 Pro, which is way different than the Google Pixel 4a. It's a huge glass and metal phone, so moving to the Pixel 4a with its compact polycarbonate design was definitely something that I had to adjust to. Besides the design not feeling super premium, it's not water resistant, but it definitely has its benefits, and after using it, there's just something really appealing about having a phone of this size that's not like a massive brick. And it's actually the first phone in a long time that I've been using without a case, since it's not just made of glass. It's also super manageable in one hand and just overall really comfortable to use, with the whole phone being pretty lightweight and compact, as well as having these rounded edges. If you're into things being minimal, you'll also be a big fan of this, with its really simple matte black finish and white power button with that little bit of green. Despite its overall size though, you're still getting a 5.8-inch display with a hole punch cutout for the front-facing camera. The big thing here though is that the front of the phone just feels way more in line with modern bezel-less phones compared to past Pixel devices, which is actually really funny because this is the least expensive Pixel phone to date. The panel itself looks really nice as well. It's a 1080p OLED panel, which combined with that relatively small 5.8-inch size, by today's standards anyways, means you're getting a very solid 443 pixels per inch, so things like text are super sharp on here. 60 Hz is to be expected at this price, but I still found that to be one of the most obvious things in coming from the 90 Hz on the Oneplus 7 Pro. Now right above that display we have an earpiece speaker, which also doubles as one of the stereo speakers, and they sound good and can get pretty loud as well. And that, combined with the headphone jack up on top, means the whole audio experience on here is actually really good. On the back here you also have a rear fingerprint sensor, and overall it works well. My only real complaint about it is that sometimes I miss the sensor when I go to unlock it, mainly just because it has the same matte texture as the rest of the phone and it's only slightly recessed into the back. That's definitely something that's been less of an issue the more I got used to using it, but besides that, the sensor itself scans very quickly and consistently as well. Now right next to that is the camera, and straight up pretty much all of the great things you've heard about this single 12.2 megapixel camera are true. It takes great images in even the more challenging conditions with, great contrast, saturation, exposure, dynamic range. The single camera's focal length can be limiting sometimes, but it does a fantastic job 99% of the time, so that's the main thing. I did notice though that sometimes I get some weird, pretty extreme shifts in certain colors. It doesn't really happen that often, but I noticed certain lighting conditions can trigger that. This is something that could be fixed through a software update though. Speaking of software, the camera's performance is pretty much thanks to Google's software magic going on behind the scenes. A good example of that is Night Sight, which lets you capture these amazingly clean images at night. And if you put your phone on a tripod, it'll switch into astrophotography mode to get some even better results from longer exposures. Autofocus tracking is a feature that I found to be really useful to keep focus on my subject when I'm moving around or when it's moving around. Portrait mode also works well with a single lens, and you usually have to look pretty closely at the final image to be able to find that transition between the subject and background. I also enjoyed recording video on here, although it can look over sharpened at times, which looks unnatural, and there's no option for 4K 60 FPS or 1080p at 240 FPS for slow-mo, which is something to consider. Footage is definitely smooth though with the OIS and software stabilization working. There's no extra crop when you record in 4K, which is nice, and the audio quality from those microphones sounds really good to me. Overall, the experience here is basically point and shoot. You don't have a ton of control over your images when you're taking them, besides exposure and shadow adjustments, but if you're someone who doesn't care about having complete creative control over your images, then this works great. So I mentioned software, and I want to get more into that because if you just look at the hardware of this phone, you're only really seeing part of the story. A lot of the hardware here, like the Snapdragon 730G and Adreno 618, isn't really high-end, and the 12.2 megapixel camera isn't a very large sensor. But if there's one thing Google knows, it's software. And that, with the optimization here, really makes this phone a nice experience to use. Performance is overall good. It can feel sometimes a bit choppy when you're swiping around really quickly, and photos can take a second to process after you take them, but in daily use it hasn't really been an issue. And if you watch my last video on this phone's gaming performance, you'll see that it actually does a solid job at playing some popular games. Plus, boot up is really quick and there's no bloatware, just the essentials. The whole software experience here is very simple, which I'm always a fan of. But even though it's simple, you still have some control over the look of certain things like your icons and fonts with custom profiles that this lets you create. And it also comes with a cool new live wallpaper that actually changes based on your battery life. You also get some nice extra features like live call transcription, so you can basically have Google Assistant answer your calls. Now playing, which tells you obviously what songs are playing around you. The option to swipe down on your fingerprint sensor for notifications, and an always on display thanks to it being OLED. Plus, this is a Google phone, so frequent software updates for the next 3 years is a big benefit here. This well-optimized software combined with the power-efficient Snapdragon 730G, 1080p 60Hz display, and the good size 3140 mAh battery. When I say good size, I mean for more compact phones, not like larger phones, it means you can expect solid battery life. My screen on time has varied a lot lately, and I don't think screen on time is a very good indicator of battery life in general because people use their phones in different ways, obviously. But I would say I've been able to get about 5.5 hours of screen on time. And in general, I think battery life is a positive because I've been able to also get a full day of use on pretty much every normal day. And one downside is that this does not support wireless charging, but it does come with a fast 18-watt charger in the box. This phone also only comes in one version, so you only have one option for storage and there's no expandable storage on here. And all of that might sound like a downside, but that version comes with 6 GB of RAM and 128 GB of storage, which is actually really good for the price. If you consider the iPhone SE, you're only getting 64 GB of storage in the base version, and that phone is already more expensive, so that is something that makes this phone easier to recommend. And just in general, this is an easy phone to recommend. If you consider that when you buy a new phone, you're obviously gonna pay for every extra feature that it offers. So all those phones with 5 different cameras or things like reverse wireless charging, they're all gonna be more expensive because of that. But I think for a lot of buyers, many of those features just straight up aren't really needed. This phone, on the other hand, does a really good job at covering the most important things and has what basically everyone needs, like solid battery life and display and great camera and software, plus updates for the next 3 years. So no matter who you are, you know everything you pay for you'll actually end up using. This is $349 though, so it's not going to have everything, and obviously if you really want wireless charging, an IP rating, a high refresh rate display, the best performance, or just a larger screen, then I wouldn't recommend this. But I think for a lot of people out there who want a phone that does a solid job at covering the essential stuff and allows them to do everything they need to do with a phone, then this is absolutely the phone to get. Plus it comes with a headphone jack, so you really can't beat that. Anyway, that's my thoughts on the Pixel 4a. Hopefully this gave you a better idea of what to expect if you plan on purchasing this phone for yourself. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.